Something is flipping right now faster than almost anyone predicted. India now builds roughly 1 in 4 iPhones on the entire planet. See, in the past year, Apple went from 36 million iPhones assembled in India to 55 million. That's a 53% jump in 12 months. So these numbers are pretty crazy, but get this. For the first time ever, that includes the iPhone Pro Max, and that's the most expensive iPhone that Apple sells. The one with the tightest tolerances, the hardest components to get right, the phone that was supposed to be untouchable outside of China. Back when the 17 first launched, I kind of figured that this meant a small, symbolic assembly line they would do somewhere in India. Like, like a press release, a few thousand units for the local market. Just enough for Apple to technically say that it makes iPhones there without actually meaning that much in practice. But the Pro Max is actually really hard to build. It demands a level of precision that until recently you could only find in China. I mean, that precision took 3 decades to build, factory by factory, supplier by supplier. But what actually changed? I mean, why did the hardest phone Apple makes suddenly become buildable somewhere else? By the way, this whole story is way bigger than just Apple. Samsung, Google, Dell, HP, and Lenovo are all quietly doing versions of the same thing right now. And if this pattern continues, the label Made in China will start losing its grip on the entire global economy. So in this video, I'm going to break down what's actually driving all this and what happens next. What does this do to China's grip on manufacturing? What Trump actually wants from Apple, where that stands now, and what India is risking by betting this big. Also, whatever happened to Vietnam in all this? So Apple first said that it was going to diversify out of China back in 2019. The expectation was that this would take a decade, maybe longer. A pilot factory, a handful of older models, maybe mostly symbolic for the headlines to appease the US government. Meanwhile, the real manufacturing stayed exactly where it always had. See, nobody expected India to jump from 18% of global iPhone output to 25% in about 2 years. And nobody expected that jump to include the premium phones. But what changed? Well, things are only accelerating now because recently, India wiped out import duties on the components that go inside every iPhone. Things like wireless charging modules and lithium-ion battery cells. That's between 5 to 7.5% saved. So the Indian government is now making a long-term bet and putting it into law. At the same time, India rebuilt its export subsidy program. This is the program that's been quietly paying manufacturers bonuses since 2021 based on how much they can export. This year, they made the rewards even bigger to drive more exports. Apple's suppliers are cashing in, but so is everyone else. Samsung built the largest mobile phone factory on Earth in India, doubling its output to 120 million phones a year. Foxconn partnered with HCL Tech to build a semiconductor plant. Dell, HP, Lenovo, they've all committed to building tech hardware locally too. I mean, India is building an entire electronics economy around this movement. So what does this mean for China? Apple is probably the hardest company on Earth to actually pull off this move because it has bigger volume than almost anyone, tighter precision than almost anyone. So if Apple can move a quarter of its production out of China in just 2 years, that's a signal about something like much bigger than just this company. See, a lot of people assume Apple builds the iPhone in a single Chinese factory, but that's wrong. It actually takes hundreds of factories across the country to produce one device. Final assembly might happen at a massive complex like Foxconn's Zhengzhou plant, nicknamed iPhone City, but the parts and raw materials come from over 200 suppliers worldwide, with a huge chunk of those component factories based in mainland China. You can imagine how insane it is to actually move its entire ecosystem to another country, especially a country like India. But here's the real question. Can an economy that grew powerful by being irreplaceable actually survive being replaced? Even a little? I mean, even at the edges? See, China's advantage was never actually just about like cheap labor. I mean, plenty of countries have cheap labor. Indonesia, Vietnam. But what China built was density. If you need one specific machined part, you can find 50 different suppliers within an hour's drive of almost any factory in the country. So that kind of network cannot just get built overnight in India, even with a lot of money. There's even a new analysis that puts a real number on all this. US. Fully cutting China out of the picture would actually cost both the US and Europe a combined $23 trillion over the next 25 years. I mean, that's insane. Because China spent decades building all of this network, to decouple China from manufacturing overnight, well, you'd have to build an entire second version of that infrastructure somewhere else from the ground up. The average person spends about 5 years of their life doing tasks on a computer. I'm talking about emails, spreadsheets, copying and pasting between platforms, all of the stuff that nobody actually wants to be doing. Now, you would think that this is just part of the job, but I started paying attention to how the smartest teams I know are quietly cutting down that number, not by working harder, but by letting AI take on the busy work so that they can actually focus on the tasks that need to be done by a human. That's basically what Zap Connect is. It's Zapier's yearly online event, completely free, where people show up and swap ideas on how to use AI to get their time back. Live sessions, product people answering real questions, and a room full of others figuring out the same thing you are. It's happening September 23rd. If you're curious what it looks like, check it out. It's worth an hour of your time. The link is in the description, and big thanks to Zapier for sponsoring this week's video. And now back to the video. Now, technically it's doable, but it's brutally expensive, which is why most people who study all this think that fully decoupling isn't what's actually going to happen. What's coming is a partial decoupling. Companies picking their spots instead of just like ripping the whole thing out. So here's my question. China makes roughly 97% of the world's shipping containers. You know, the literal steel boxes that move stuff around the planet. Now, India only just started shipping its own export grade containers this year, and yet it still managed, remember, that 53% jump in iPhone output in just 12 months. All of this means that India is not letting anything stop it. So what does this mean for the US? Here's what's actually pushing all of this. Tariffs.
Say tariffs is the most beautiful word to me in the dictionary.
See, American duties on Chinese goods have climbed as high as 145%. India's rate sits around 26%. Trump did not just want Apple to leave China because he's not the biggest fan of China and he feels like he's competing with China. He wanted Apple to build in America. Last year, he pushed Tim Cook publicly, and Apple responded by pledging $500 billion towards US manufacturing and infrastructure over 4 years. Things like a new server factory in Texas and an expanded advanced manufacturing fund. Now that's the deal that Trump got. Here's the catch. Apple is building more in America and building more in India at the same time. See, Trump has made it clear that he'd rather see the phones themselves made in the US, not just servers and back-end infrastructure. But so far that hasn't happened. And most analysts will say that an American-made iPhone would cost thousands of dollars more to build. And India has had its share of kind of run-ins with Trump's trade policies. Trump added a 25% tariff on India in 2025. That was unrelated to phones. It was just over its continued purchases of Russian oil. Now that pushed India's overall tariff rate as high as 50% for some months before it got pushed back down. So what does this mean for you and me? If tariffs keep pushing manufacturing out of China and India costs 5 to 10% more to build in, well, someone has to eat the gap. Maybe it's Apple's margins, maybe it's how much you pay for your next iPhone. Reshoring sounds good on paper, but US manufacturing employment kept falling even as tariffs rose. So that big bet has not paid off yet for anyone. Okay, what does this all mean for India? This could be like India's biggest win it's had in decades. Let's look at all the pieces together. So Foxconn building a plant expected to create 50,000 jobs. Tata Electronics is one of India's biggest industrial names, and it's now directly building iPhones. Apple is also in early talks with Indian chipmakers about local semiconductor work, which is a much deeper commitment than just assembling iPhones. But right now there's actually real pressure on India to move fast. Can it fix its power grid problems in time? Patch the logistics holes? Here's a question I just thought of. Whatever happened to Vietnam? Remember a few years ago it looked like it would be like the real winner of this China versus US story? Well, it actually turns out that Vietnam is thriving too, it's just doing a different job. Vietnam's tariff rate on exports to the US actually dropped quite a bit, making it one of the cheapest places on earth to ship from. Samsung, Intel, and LG all have major operations there. But here's the catch. A lot of what Vietnam does is final assembly of parts that were already made in China. One analyst found that some Vietnamese factories were adding less than 5% of the actual value to the product, basically screwing together Chinese components and shipping them onward. So the real story here goes beyond just China versus India. One thing has already happened, and it happened recently. The question of whether Apple would ever move its best phone out of China is no longer like hypothetical, right? The total iPhones is sitting at 25% and it's climbing. And right now, with the one phone that nobody thought would move out of China, it has moved out. It's moved to India. I want to know, where do you predict this all goes? Does India keep climbing? Does Vietnam quietly win by doing less and costing less? Or will China find a way to hold on to the thing that built its whole economy? Tell me below in the comments, and subscribe if you're new here. It helps support this channel massively, and I'll see you in the next video.